Sichuan, which is the largest area for hydropowered Bitcoin mining in the world, is now under pressure from the government there to put down any Bitcoin mining operations associated with regulations that passed out last year in 2020. They're also putting regulations on private miners as well, which kind of operate in more seedy and like unseemly ways where you can't really track them. This is big news because China has already kind of put out a notice against a lot of other miners in different areas, including Xinjiang and the Yunnan provinces, among a few other places. And so they're just cracking down on Bitcoin mining. They don't want it to happen there anymore. There's been a few reasons given over the last few months for why this is happening. Some of it has to do with carbon neutrality. The Chinese Communist Party has been pushing for that for a little bit. There's also been some speculation over the Chinese Communist Party wanting more social peace and less social unrest, which is they kind of associate with the rise in cryptocurrencies over there generally. And so cracking down on Bitcoin mining is one way where you can kind of touch an aspect of Bitcoin and kind of get that social pressure back down. So pretty big development overall. Sichuan is a huge area for Bitcoin mining, and it's going to probably increase just the movement of Bitcoin mining from China to different areas in the world like Kazakhstan or even North America. I want to toss this right over to Naomi. You've been in the space for a while, and we've seen like lots of different discussions of China banning Bitcoin, China banning Bitcoin mining, China banning Bitcoin exchanges. So what do you think about this new development? It seems pretty serious.
It does seem serious indeed. I mean, it's interesting because we're always scrambling after regulation and clarity so that we can have stability in the space. This kind of goes to show you that you can have, the government giving the blessing to an entire industry and then suddenly just doing a 180. So it seems like the initial miners that are being targeted were ones that were actually sanctioned by the government. They got permission to, get power from these hydro dams. And it's mainly because in Sichuan in particular, they're producing twice as much energy as they can fit in the grid. So you have the wet season and there's way too much electricity there. So they've sanctioned these mining companies to use that excess power there. And now they've turned around and they're the ones that they're going after initially, which is kind of frightening. And I feel for the people there. It's also interesting because you mentioned, Will, they're talking about carbon neutrality. It's like, well, so what does the hydro dam have to do with that? They're producing whatever gases regardless, and this isn't doing anything to increase carbon in the atmosphere. So it's just very interesting that they're trying that tactic as well. It's environmental, when clearly this is all about control. I mean, in parallel to this, you have the government that's rolling out their digital yuan. Apparently, they're testing with a bunch of ATMs at the moment across the country. And so it's very clearly a power move where they really don't want decentralized currencies. They really don't want anything outside of their control, and they're realizing that digital money is the future, but they want it to be their digital money. They don't want alternatives there. And so this is just a massive crackdown. It's sad to see it, actually. Zach, I'm going to throw to you.
Yeah, the capital flight stuff in China is real, right? Like people looking to get their assets out of the national currency and into other assets, whether it's Bitcoin, gold, Macau, real estate, whatever. That's a big issue for China, so it makes sense that would certainly be part of the context here. I think this actually this is actually a really big deal, right? This is not the first province to do this. This really does kind of poke some holes in the narrative around a lot of the Bitcoin mined in China, especially during the rainy season, is mined using environmentally responsible power sources driven largely by hydropower, right? There are other externalities with hydropower. Certainly, a lot of these dams displace a lot of people and displace some ecological habitat, but generally speaking, this is the clean power that Bitcoiners like to point to when they say, hey, 60%, hey, 40% of Bitcoin is mined using green energy. So I think this really does compromise the standing of that argument, and I'd be really interested to see what comes of it. I think, Will, you're certainly right, and you have a front row seat here in seeing how mining seeing how mining firms are moving to different geographies. And I just wanted to throw it back to you, Will, since you're plugged into the mining scene probably more than most. You mentioned Kazakhstan. What are some of the other geographies that you see benefiting from that? I think there is obviously a push for North America to pick up some of the slack, but that may not be realistic. So I'm just curious about what this means for sort of the geographical distribution of Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, great question. So far, what I've seen is that Kazakhstan, Quebec, Texas, and even Paraguay are kind of the areas that Bitcoin miners are looking at. So the biggest issue is transporting all these machines right now, which is really tough, especially given that the price of Bitcoin is actually pretty high for Bitcoin mining itself. Like you're making a lot of money if you're plugged in right now, and these people are going to have to forego all those profits. They're going to have to ship these machines and set up new locations. North America right now, there's a lot of energy to be used, but there's not a lot of facilities built up all over the place. There's just like not that many facilities, and so people are scrambling to figure that out. Paraguay is an interesting location that I've heard of a lot recently. There's some new facilities being built out down there, and there's pretty cheap energy as well. So it just kind of depends also on like what the risk appetite for these Chinese capitalists are looking like. Do they want to move all their machines halfway across the world, or do they want to move it a little bit closer to home, like it's somewhere in Central Asia? But Central Asia brings up its own problems as well. There's less rule of law, and building the machine, like the hardware requirements for it, is not as great as North America. So there's that interesting development for sure. I think it's going to be a pretty seismic move for the Bitcoin mining industry and then Bitcoin itself over the next year.
Yeah, it should be noted that Bitcoin appears down on the news of that coming out this morning.